I am once again revisiting one of my old reviews. This is from 2013 and it is Star Trek Into Darkness. Now, as I've mentioned before on this channel, I was a huge Star Trek fan when I was young, like 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade. I was huge into Star Trek. I've grown out of it somewhat, but I still have an emotional attachment to it to some degree, and I certainly take an interest in where the franchise is going and discussions around it. So there was a lot of discussion when this movie came out by Star Trek fans, and almost all of it negative. People were very upset about two things. The first thing was that it was rebooting Star Trek as an action franchise. Now, it was not the first movie in the Star Trek reboot, it was the second movie, but the first movie had been an action movie. People largely forgave that because it was so exciting. But now with this movie, it's just being very clear that this is just another action franchise, and people who were expecting a more intellectual Star Trek were upset about it. Second reason people were upset is because it was redoing the Wrath of Khan storyline. So here we are, just 2 movies into the new Star Trek franchise. The first movie was just a setup movie. In fact, as I said in my review of the first movie, this was just the whole point of that first movie was just to establish the new Star Trek. And then where they would go from here would determine how well the new reboot would work. But yeah, the second movie and they couldn't think of any better ideas than to redo the Wrath of Khan. So that's where a lot of the outrage was. I was actually mostly forgiving on these 2 points, although I could see where they were coming from. But in terms of the outrage over Star Trek being an action franchise, round about the time that this movie came out, I read an interview by Star Trek writer Ronald D. Moore that said, look, you've got to realize that the Star Trek movies are an entirely different beast. And I read that and I thought, yeah, that's exactly right. The Star Trek movies are not the Star Trek TV shows. They've got to have bigger stakes, they've got to have a bigger draw, they've got to have bigger set pieces. I mean, you can't just have a movie and it be like a slow simmering mystery like the original Star Trek was. If you're going to do the whole Hollywood hype machine and release the trailers, and then release the second trailers and get people so jived up for getting to this movie, and people go to the movie and they buy the popcorn and they get their soda and they're sitting down in their seat and they think, okay, this is going to be the best movie ever. Yeah, you've got to razzle and dazzle them somewhat. I mean, even the classic Trek original movies from the 1980s, well, they were a very different beast from this. I think most of them had a higher stakes than the original TV show. And the ones that were closer in format to the original TV show, like maybe Star Trek 1, were some of the least well received of those original Star Trek movies. So I was perfectly willing to let this movie just be an action movie, and I thought we'll get more intelligent Star Trek when Star Trek comes back to the small screen again. Now, did we get more intelligent Star Trek when Star Trek came back to the small screen? I guess that's a discussion for another day, but I don't blame it on the movies. The second thing about Khan coming back, I was largely willing to forgive this as well. It's a rebooted Star Trek. They're going for replaying the classic hits again. I was fine with that. I think what has become very clear in retrospect, however, and this is perhaps something that I realized very clearly after the third Star Trek came out, Star Trek Beyond. And it now looks like those are the only 3 we are going to get with the rebooted J.J. Abrams Star Trek, just these 3 movies. is that they all involved some sort of nefarious villain who needed to be defeated in a fight. There was all three of them revolved around some sort of nefarious villain who was going to destroy the universe or was going to blow up Earth. And they had to have this big fight to stop the villain from blowing everything up. That was the Star Trek 2009, that was Star Trek Into Darkness, and that was Star Trek Beyond. Now, I'm getting somewhat ahead of myself. Maybe I should save this criticism for my review of Star Trek Beyond. But in retrospect, it seems very clear that that's all they could do with this franchise. That's all the ideas they have. And it's interesting to compare it to the original Star Trek movies, isn't it? Because the Star Trek movies with the original cast, for the sake of simplicity, we'll just limit the discussion to the original cast. Star Trek 1 to 6, no two of those movies were alike. I mean, there were some good movies in that bunch, and there were some mediocre movies in that bunch. I don't think any of them were bad. I'm a fan, so that's my perspective. So from good to mediocre, but Star Trek 1 was completely different than Star Trek 2, which was completely different from Star Trek 3, 4, 5, 6. You know, there were some interesting ideas in that group, but they had ideas. So in this respect, yeah, it's looking... I think in retrospect that's quite a point against this new rebooted Star Trek, is that they couldn't come up with a big idea other than the big bad guy wants to blow everything up and there needs to be a big fight to stop him. Okay, that being said though, I largely enjoyed Star Trek Into Darkness. I went to the movie theater and I had a great time watching it. And I know that there are lots of parts of this movie that don't entirely make sense. And the internet has already covered this very well. I mean, Red Letter Media had a discussion on this movie in which they picked out a lot of the plot holes. My personal favorite was the frequently asked questions on the site IO9, which I'll try to remember to leave a link to in the description down below. This was a feature that they used to run on this website. They stopped doing it, but it was like somebody asking questions about the movie and somebody answering the questions about the movie. And as the dialogue progressed, the person asking the questions would get more and more exasperated as the movie was progressing, and the person answering the questions would be doing their best to manage the anger of the person who was getting exasperated, and it was really well done. I'll link to it in the description down below. If you've not read it, check it out. And it perfectly revealed all the problems with the movie. I have one or two qualms with their interpretation of what was happening, especially regarding Khan's master plan and those 72 photon torpedoes, which housed Khan's soldiers in them. But I'm not going to get into that now. You can make up your own mind. Oh, sorry. Spoilers. I forgot to mention that at the top of the video. I will be doing spoilers here. So we're going to get into the plot. But yeah, they go into all the stupid things that this movie does. You know, right from a beginning opening sequence that doesn't make any sense to Khan's plan, which seems to have a few holes in it, to the Starfleet's boneheaded reaction to it. And yeah, they're right. They're right. There are large parts of this movie that don't make any sense. As a Star Trek fan, it's better. I think it's better when Star Trek is good. You know, I don't like it when the series dips into a low point and churns out a movie that's not up to its usual intelligence. But at the same time, it's far too late to start getting disproportionately upset about this now. I mean, go back through and look at all the original Star Trek movies or the Next Generation Star Trek movies. There's been plenty of stuff in there that doesn't make sense or had plot holes in it, let alone getting into the original series. I mean, especially season 3, and talking about all the episodes there that had whacked out premises or didn't make a lot of sense. So, and I mentioned this, maybe at this point nobody cares, but in 2013 when this movie was coming out, there were tons of reviews and essays on the internet being like, he's ruined Star Trek, he's completely desecrated the franchise, it's over now, he's killed it. And you got to keep these things in perspective. You know, there will be good Star Trek movies and there will be bad Star Trek movies. And you can't start acting like the franchise has been completely demolished every time there's a Star Trek movie. That doesn't make sense. And if you want to play that game, then go back and watch the original series and see if all those episodes completely make sense. Excuse me. Got some sort of frog in my throat again. But yeah. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah. There were some things that didn't completely make sense. It would have been better if it made sense, but I was so enamored, but maybe enamored is the wrong word. I was so caught up with the fast pace of the movie and the action and the exciting scenes that I largely forgave the stuff that didn't make sense. I thought the action was well done. The action scenes and the fighting scenes were very exciting. I thought the actors did a good job. Now this is the first kind of movie where they're allowed to play their characters. The first 2009 Star Trek movie was just setting up these new characters. They are really spot on. This new J.J. Abrams cast. They were able to give the essence of these characters so well, I thought. The only thing is that it makes you wonder to what extent they're playing caricatures. And maybe the original series Star Trek was always caricatures. I mean, they were played by some charismatic actors that made us fall in love with them. But, they all had very defining characteristics, which we can see in retrospect made it very easy for another actor to pick it up. I mean, Scotty has certain catchphrases and certain things he always does. Another actor can do those catchphrases just as well. Spock has a certain persona which has been so infused into the pop culture, and another actor seems to have done that just as well as the original. I take that back. It's nothing that any other actor could do. I think this cast was particularly talented. So, what's his name? I'm blanking on the name. The guy who does McCoy in the new Star Trek, in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, he's quite good. He's got the essence of that character down. And the new Spock has him down. They play off of this well. Again, they're just kind of repeating the archetypes from the original series. But Dr. McCoy getting annoyed at Spock's kind of cold logic. The Kirk and Spock in this movie have character arcs. You know, they start out at loggerheads, not appreciating the other person's position. And then by the end of the movie, they've come to appreciate the other's way of doing things. It is kind of a repeat from the 2009 Star Trek movie, but these are character arcs that get repeated several times throughout the Star Trek franchise. I thought it was decently done. The thing, however, which I thought was not well done, is the thing that everybody else complained about. But I'm going to complain about it too. I think this was a very bad choice. This was the decision to replay the ending of The Wrath of Khan, but to switch the parts of Kirk and Spock. So now it's Kirk that dies trying to save the Enterprise warp core. Yeah, it was just a bad decision from start to finish. So many reasons why this was a bad choice. The first reason it was not a good choice is because nobody wants to see the same movie beats repeated over again from a previous movie. At least certainly not that obvious. And J.J. Abrams maybe doesn't completely understand this. And if his work on the new Star Wars series is, he ran into this mistake there as well. Now, The Force Awakens, I'll talk about The Force Awakens on another day. I largely enjoyed The Force Awakens, but that blowing up the Death Star at the end, that was just way too on the nose for repetition of the classic scene from the first Star Wars. J.J. Abrams doesn't understand this, but I think most people realize that this doesn't work when those original Star Wars prequels came out. And when when George Lucas was intentionally replaying scenes from the original trilogy that he was trying to do something poetic. And I can see what he's trying to do, because, high school literature teachers love to talk about structural repetition and these kind of recurrent themes and stuff like that. So I know George Lucas was intending to do something poetic, if poetic is the right word, by recycling story beats from his original Star Wars into his prequel trilogy. But everybody else hated it. And everybody hated it when it was redone in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, when they just took that same story beat about somebody dying to revive the warp core, and they just recycled it. Nobody wants to see that. But where you really go wrong on this is you cannot replay a tragic scene like that. You can replay maybe a comic scene. You can replay an action scene. But a tragic scene like that, like the original Star Trek, The Wrath of Khan, we all saw Spock die. We all got choked up about it. We all kind of shed a tear during that moving scene, even though we knew he was going to be resurrected the next movie anyways. But we've done that already. That emotion has been spent. So when we are redoing that scene, I am not going to get teary-eyed about it a second time. I'm not going to get all choked up over Kirk dying now when it's the same exact scene. We've done that. We've exerted that emotion. You can't make me feel that pathos again by repeating that scene. But then there's that. If you haven't seen the movie for a while, maybe you don't remember this. But the Spock, the Zachary Quinto Spock, then yanks back his head and yells out, "Khan!" Which, of course, is a callback to William Shatner's famous yell of Khan from the original Wrath of Khan. Now that, that is an iconic scene that everyone remembers, but it's a scene, it's something that has become a parody of itself. It's been lampooned and parodied and referenced so often in pop culture that it's something that, you can play it maybe for laughs, but you can't expect anyone to take it seriously. And so then they're having this scene where Kirk is dying, and they are trying to make it an emotional scene, even though nobody has any emotions left to give to it at this point. And then Zachary Quinto yells out, "Khan!" And immediately we're switching to cheesy and self-parody. And you think, what emotion are we going for here? What do you even want me to feel? These filmmakers. It's just ridiculous. So they do that, and then, the whole thing is just stupid. Now, what saves it from completely ruining the movie is they don't linger on it. So once we've got that out of the way, then we're jumping into some more action scenes, and that you kind of almost forget about it. Except you kind of almost forget about it, except it's very dangerous in a franchise to start killing off characters and then bringing them back to life again. I know that the comic books do this all the time, but comics books have paid a price for this. Nobody takes it seriously anymore when a comic book character dies. The comic book audience is just very jaded to when any characters die. So in fiction, you need that threat of death to add stakes or tension to the story. And if death doesn't matter, if characters can die and become resurrected, and if this franchise is established as willing to do this, then that's not a good road to head down for the franchise. Now, of course, Star Trek has done this once before. I mean, infamously, Spock got killed off, and resurrected. Now, that was something that happened way back in the early 1980s and is now part of classic Trek, and it's probably a little bit pointless to second guess that decision now, but arguably even that was a bad decision. Arguably that they shouldn't have killed off Spock the first time. But I mean, to replay that is just not smart. Plus, the way that they brought him back was with Khan's magic blood, which, first of all, if you're going to nitpick these kind of things, I think that creates a continuity problem. Because in the original series, Khan did not have magic blood. And I know this is a reboot, but in this alternate timeline, we still have the same Khan, right? Because Khan was active in the 1990s in the Star Trek world. But if we've discovered that Khan's blood can magically bring people back, then and at the end of the movie, they don't make any attempt to downplay this. Like, oh, it was just a one-time thing only, we can never do it again. No. They have Khan's magic blood. They have the cure for death, which is now just available. Of course, in the next movie, they completely ignore this. But by the, at Star Trek Into Darkness, there's no attempt made to mitigate this at all within the movie itself. So, yeah, all of that was really stupid. Aside from that, though, I mostly like this movie. Khan and Kirk team up, I thought worked well. It was bizarre to see them team up, given their famous antagonism towards each other. But I think the script made it work. The script gave each character motivation for teaming up with the other one. The fact that Spock had the final showdown with Khan instead of Kirk, I think also was a nice little touch. I mean, Kirk and Khan have the antagonism with each other, but Spock is a super strength. Vulcans have super strength. I'm not sure the original show was entirely consistent on this, but at least in some episodes it's established that Vulcans have super strength. So to have Spock fight off against Khan, for that matter, I'm not sure the exact nature of Khan's super strength is really consistent or established within the original TV show, but whatever. Khan is super strong, Spock is super strong. It makes sense to have the final showdown be between them. I thought that was an exciting scene that they were on. I largely like this movie. Or found it entertaining, at least. Found it entertaining, in spite of its flaws. So, I'm going to close things off there. Let me know what you thought of this movie, and whether or not you thought it ruined the franchise or not. And I will see you later.